Today, a conversation with one of the tree shakers, as I would call him, here in Jacksonville and Duval County and around the country. He is been listened to and talked to, and he has talked to a number of people and written a great deal about how specifically the African American community here in Jacksonville and around the country can continue to improve themselves. This is the managing director of the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank. And yes, I'm glad he is here with us today. As always, thanks for joining us, Stanley, or Doc Scott, as you would be called.
Well, that's up to you, Carl. So we have a long relationship. We go way back, many years.
Well, I'll go with Doc for the purposes of this conversation. What is the state of African American thinking in the area of economic recovery?
We are regressing. Last time I checked, we had 53 cents on the dollar? Because I was on JCT, not on WJTT. I was listening to it, and they was talking about the wage gap between women and men's. And in the conversation, they were talking in general, but when it comes to the African American community, we had 53 cents. Now, when my father was was coming up and raising the family, they was getting about between 80 and 90 cents on the dollar. What happened? Is my question to the African American community.
Well, I mean, that is the question. What do you think has happened? I mean, we've seen some great strides. We're not alone here in Duval County, outside of Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the union, and a big city like Jackson there is still having a water quality problem that's reached epidemic proportions. They even have a black mayor, but they still couldn't avoid all the problems they had. But here in Duval County, Jacksonville, Miami, and Tampa, and Orlando, we've got black millionaires here. And around the country, we've got 2 black billionaires talking about buying BET back from I think it's a Paramount to get it. So we've got the money. We've got folks that are moneyed, but in your writings, you still talk about the fact that it just doesn't seem to be spreading out. We're still having masses of uneducated folks who don't understand how to either manage their money or get more money. Which one are we talking about?
Well, we're always talking about especially when it comes to the African American community, we talk about leadership. If you're spending that kind of money as consumers and you are not able to take 10% of that, let's say 10% of that, and bring it back to the community, mainly, let me just say the disposable income. If you're not able to tap into your disposable income and keep it for at least 3 months, not 3 months, but a month, and circulate it through the community, then you're not growing. And we having that issue here, especially in Jacksonville, but throughout the country. We are not able to do for ourselves.
But how does that flow? I mean, how can you continue to say we're not able to do for ourselves? Aren't we at the point, and have we been at the point for some time, that we're doing exactly what we want to do? Most African American black folk are doing exactly the kind of business that they want to do. When you go to the markets that we have, the street markets that are taking place all over the city for the last few years and around the country, I find out there that we have a multiple amount of businesses. You can buy everything from regard to men's hats, but how can you say that we're not growing or we're not learning from this process? It looks like folks are learning from it.
No. You talking about the mom and pop operation. In Jacksonville, for example, you need these 5 to 10 African American business can make anywhere from $5 million to $10 million gross, where you can employ people. 80% of African American business around the country only have one employee. How can you grow that way? So if you got a mom and pop operation and somebody gets sick, especially if that's the person, the breadwinner, and they get sick, what are you going to do?
But isn't that the way? I know that what you're saying is something that's been certainly going on for some time, but isn't that the way of growth, though? You start small, you start with a 10 operation, or you start with just you and the missus, or you and the girlfriend, or you and a couple of friends of my friends here lately. And of course, with the internet, the way it is, you don't have to store product, especially if you're selling retail. You don't have to store product in a warehouse anymore. You can basically store it in a warehouse online and sell it to people that way, without them necessarily having come to the store. Isn't this just a newer way of doing business?
Well, that's right. That is correct on that part. But when it comes to African Americans, the number one issue when it comes to African American businesses is having co-ops, where when we look at the researching where you have 80% of African American business only have one employee. That tells me, the think tank, that we need to partner up, have partnership co-ops. So if somebody gets sick or somebody come across some money, they can reinvest. But when you have just mom and pop operation, and I support mom and pop operation, I agree with you with the fact that you have to start somewhere. But when you are spending, last time I checked, in Jacksonville, we spend about $15 billion according to the New York Life Insurance. And we are not able to capitalize on that. And I'm talking about in the main districts for African American in 7, 8, 9, and 10. Why? In the urban core. I'm talking about in the urban core, because we get it confused when we talk about on the north side. There's two income levels on the north side, separated by Dunn's Avenue. So I'm talking about the urban core. When it comes to the urban core, yes, we have African Americans who have pop-ups. That's once, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Well, I say every quarter. You can't grow that way.
In a recent writing of yours and both of our friend Edward Exon Jr., you wrote, "I acknowledge with great pride that many Blacks have made enormous contributions to Jacksonville, America, and the world. Yet, as we look back on the past 52 years since the post-consolidation in Jacksonville, research shows the miseducation of the Negro race. The self-inflicted miseducation of the Negro is homegrown. For over 50 years, the leadership's self-aggrandizement has been destroying nearly 3 generations' souls, minds, and even lives. Has any of that changed given the opportunities for African Americans and, quite frankly, everybody to get an education? There are no impediments to getting education per se, but are you talking about getting a different word out to the African American population?
Well, there's 2 types of education. One is life skills, and one operate when it comes to having a career or a job. What I'm talking about, life skills. We have a social problem in the African American community. Where are the business leadership? Now we have politicians, we have the faith-based, we have a small education. But when it comes to economics, where is the leaders? Yes, there's African Americans who are doing pretty good, have good income. But when you look at the income and compare it to other nationalities, we in bad shape. We at the bottom.
So you're saying that in 2023, the same impediments that we had in 1920 and 1953 and 1963 and 1973 and 1983, you're saying the same impediments are there that are keeping the quote Negro miseducated?
Yes. One of the main community that hurt African American, the feminine movement and immigration. See, African Americans just wanted our rights to go where we wanted to go, spend our money wherever we wanted to spend, but we did not need the Caucasian community to take over our community. It's up to the African American community to do for self, just like any other nationality. With us spending the amount of money, and I'm just talking about here in Jacksonville, we do not control now one community in Jacksonville.
Well, but I mean, that's no longer a reality given where we are. Integration was going to happen because of the movements that took place in the 50s and 60s, 70s, and finally in 1990s, we managed to totally desegregate the school system. So integration was going to happen. And, you know, the Sugar Hill that we knew down at the Villa is long since gone. I mean, there's some bastions where majority African American live, but quite frankly, when we look at Myrtle Avenue and the corner of Myrtle Avenue and Moncrief where they intersect, there are a number of white families that are living there. There are a number of white families that are living up and down Moncrief. And believe it or not, even in the old Cleveland Arms over there on Cleveland Road. So the integration was going to happen. But the question is, are you talking about a separatism from where we are? Are you talking about African Americans still separating themselves from the America that we live in? Or what are we talking about here?
We are talking about mindset. Every nationality, Hispanics, the Asian, or Caucasian, every nationality have identity. African Americans in this country don't have an identity. We don't control anything. That's how that's part of the identity. So that's a problem. And then you have two groups of African American. You have the Bula, the bougie folks, which is the new 10th of the 10th, who do not care about the community. And I give you an example of when it comes to leadership. Most of the African Americans here in Jacksonville in leadership don't live in the community. Whether it be faith-based politicians. Now, politicians may be, say they're in the community, but some of them even have property in other places, but they use the address. I don't want to get into that part of it, but the main point of what I'm saying here, when it comes to African American leadership, you have classism. And it's hurting the African American community. And it keeps the majority of African Americans, when you look at the amount of money we spend on the average, I think about $35,000 in Jacksonville. Caucasian community, close to $250,000 when it comes to average income. That's a problem. And the reason why we having that problem here, because African Americans create nothing for themselves, and especially when it comes to business. With the think tank, we realize that when African Americans can come together, 3, 4, 5 of them can come together and create a co-op, then you can employ other folks to bring in the talent and the skills that you need to create a business that'll grow anywhere from $5 to $10 million. That's easy today, just like you said, when it comes to technology today, when it comes to the internet. But when you look at the numbers, it'll show that African Americans have not regressed. African Americans are regressing more and more today, even under the time of technology. When it comes to STEM, I don't hear African Americans talking about STEM technology, the jobs of the future.
Have you had any conversations with, just as a for instance, the founders of the Community Development Corporation that's sitting right there at Moncrief and Myrtle Avenue? It's been there for some time, right across the street from the fire department. Everybody who knows Jacksonville knows where it is. Have you had any conversations with them? Huh?
You talking about Tuckweiler?
Yes,
community?
The Tutwiler folks. I mean, they're
I have reached out to Tuckweiler for the last 5 years and can't even get a conversation with him. And that's what you see a lot in the African American community. Even with the North Side Coalition, even though I have much respect for them, I have much respect for all African Americans. But when it come down, sitting down, talking about what we can do as a collective group, you have classism and you have just you're dealing with jealousy. You have a lot of jealousy in the leadership, and that's a big problem. You
cite that as one of the impediments to getting the job done.
That's the biggest one. The jealousy, more than anything. And it's not the type of personal jealousy. What it is, I got my own, well, or I'm getting a little bit of money and I know what they're getting because I can look at the city numbers in these different entities and see what the nonprofits are getting. I'm talking about African American nonprofit, which is different from the Caucasian nonprofit, two different types of money. But when it comes to the African American community, we are still asking for peanuts. Even though we pay all this taxation in Jacksonville, we'll go out there. The new game is getting $100,000 with African American. That's the new game. You give them $100,000 and they'll jump up and down. Where the new game is, we dealing with billions of dollars in this city here. When they come to is for changing the community, you need anywhere from $25 to $50 million to change the community. But African American leadership, I'm talking about just African American leadership, they're still talking about $100,000. And then when they go to these meetings, when they get their little piece, their little $100,000, then you got the jealousy, you got the envy. Yes. And then you have folks, for example, I'm gonna give you a very good example. And I have much love for the Urban League. But I've been reaching out to the Urban League, and I fell out with them because they were so concerned about keeping their little jobs more than anything else. So when the African American come in there to try to talk to them about economics, they are more concerned about their job or keeping their little. Because I don't know what they really do, and I'm up there. I'm up there with Danford. I'm up there with Danford. When you reach out to them, they get the co-workers or the workers in there get jealous because they think you coming to get their job. That's a crying shame, man.
Well, each one of you're right to a great extent. Each one of those organizations, and NAACP included in it, but the Urban League and NAACP are the oldest and most well-known, aside from the alpha organizations around town, the fraternities and sororities. But each one of them has their own mission, and they're only going to operate within their mission, so to speak. And of course, the Urban League is less volunteer-oriented than it is program-oriented. They get the money in to work the program that they determine they want to work. And they move on to another program that they determine they want to work, and they employ people to work those programs with a few volunteers. So if you're interfering with the program that they've determined they're going to work, no, they're not going to be very responsive to it. They're just not.
I agree with you. Let me say something. I'm glad you brought that up. I am with them when it comes to their program. If you say you have an economic program, why can't we sit down? Right? Why can't we sit down and put a plan together that we can agree on and work it together? I would not go to the Urban League, the NAACP, or any African American organization if I am not there to help them.
Well, I think the key here is what is your determination of help? When we're talking about, if I'm in business, it's one thing to talk about what African Americans need to be educated to get into business and to maintain the business. It's another thing when we're talking about how they're going to thrive in the business. The Urban League or nobody else really has a great key to that. You get a better key, quite frankly, in some training, believe it or not, better training if you work under the program of the Jacksonville Chamber, because they will actually send somebody out to work with you in your business and point out to you the problems that you're having and help you get success. I don't see anything with it necessarily within the Urban League's thing, just picking them out, that says that that's going to take place. So what is it in particular that you're saying that African Americans need to have to succeed economically, business-wise, other than what they're doing? Is there something in particular that they're not doing? Because they have to have a product that people are going to buy, and they need an audience of people who are going to buy that. And that audience has to extend beyond the African American community if they're going to become successful, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. My concern once again is we put a plan of action. The city of Jacksonville. Give you a prime example. I don't know if you're aware, but I spend a lot of hours in the city of Jacksonville, city councils, the mayor's office, and other government entities. Let me say that again, because I want to make sure you hear me loud and clear. And the reason why I'm saying that is the knowledge that you bring back to a community, regardless of race, you bring back the knowledge. Taxation. There's plenty opportunity for African Americans in the city of Jacksonville. The money come from the state, it come from the feds. The money come to Jacksonville. It stayed because African Americans never use the money. They cannot get their paperwork together. They cannot apply for the money because the money is there. The money stay there for 2, 3, 4 years, and then the money go to general funds. That means that any city council member can use it, or the mayor. So why are African Americans, and I'm not talking about the Urban League, because I have respect for every African American organization. My issue with them is that they are not a collective group. Now, you've seen a good example of that when it comes to the redistricting. Yes, the African American think tank, we did our job, is going out there advocating and, with the mayor's office, with the city council and other entities to let them know we have a concern, because anybody can pull up our work. Where every nationality have someone that come downtown. You can see them down there in city council meetings that advocate for their community, organizations, and other entities in this country. I mean, in this city. Why is that not taking place in the African American community? I'm the one downtown, the think tank. The think tank is the one downtown bringing the information available to the community. And we know for a fact there's many opportunities for African Americans to build. Everything is not about racism. Everything, yes, in Jacksonville. And that's the problem I'm having with the African American leadership. Because they'll throw that out there. They'll throw that out there quickly. Racism. When you have a meeting with them, when they're not around Caucasian, they'll talk about racism. Yeah. By who?
Let's switch gears just a minute for the few minutes we have left. African Americans now are on both sides of the political fence. You said you attend city council meetings and you see this already. We got them on both sides of the political fence. We're at the brink where possibly African American, we have a black sheriff for the second time in the history of the city. 2 African American men succeeded themselves as presidents of the city council. We've got 2 African American women running for mayor of Jacksonville. One has just finished a term in the Florida State Senate, and of course we've got at least 4 or 5 other African American Black city council members that are there. So, given the fact that we have politically some people in seats of power, and our independent authorities, by the way, are all hit, for the most part, with the exception of one, the Port Authority, the JTA, and the I thought at one time even the Airport Authority, were the Housing Authority, all headed by African American men. So what? On both sides of the thing, Republican and Democrats. Why hasn't any progress been made, at least proposals have been made along the lines of what you're talking about? in the political atmosphere, in the political territory?
Because all of them have boss. My mentor, Mr. Edward Exon, the late Mr. Edward Exon, told me that many years ago, over 20 years ago. All of them have boss, and all the bosses are Caucasian. African American has not put together a comprehensive plan of action. Last time they did anything of that nature was the retreat. I think in 1997, something like that. I think you may have been on there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I have copies of that. I have data, all that. When it comes to data, we have all the data you need on anything going on in Jacksonville, especially for African American. But going back to the point here, we have most of these African American that's in leadership are Republicans. They has nothing to do with their race. It has to do with whatever political party they are in. Now, let's talk about those two that's running for mayor. One of them is a senator. Where is the receivables since they've been in that position? All them years now. I think she's been there over 20 years. If you add all her years together, where's her receivables? I'm saying show something in the community. Like Mia Jones, for example. Mia Jones, when she did Legend out there, Mr. Exon and I, behind the scenes, along with Eunice and a few others, was out advocating for one of the most successful community development was Legend Center. Why we are not able to do that? We have almost 6, 7 business corridors over here on the north side. Why we are not able to move them forward? When you talk about Kings Road, Moncrief, when you talk about Dunn's Avenue, when you talk about the East Side and others, in Sutel, why we are not able to create business opportunities for African American and employ these young men out here and women in the community.
So, given all of that, what's next? Do you modify your strategy in order to meet these headwinds that you've run into, or are you going to continue along the same path?
Well, I'm making a few changes. I'm not interested in spending much time down in the city hall anymore, because for the African American community, that's not where our problem is. Our problem is leadership. Now, leadership is needed all over Jacksonville, regardless of race. But when it comes to the African American community, we need to remove most of the leaders that's been around. They've been around, some of them 50, 60 years. We still talking about Axe Handle Saturday, which is important. But what about economics? I reached out to Pastor Gundy over there, which is a good guy, and he's great when it comes to politics. But what about economics? Every time I reach out to talk to African Americans, they don't want to talk about economics. They want somebody to cut them a check. Even when I talk to the small business people, the first thing come out their mouth, they want a check. But they don't want to go through the process. Because when I go down to City Hall with the economic development, it's a process. Everything that takes place in this country is a process. For some reason, somebody told the African Americans that they're supposed to get a free check. It doesn't work that way. But there's opportunities in the community. So for the answer your question, for us right now is putting plans of action together when it comes to La Villa. We need to finish La Villa and the east side, because what's taking place over there, you get in both locations, gentrification taking place. Gentrification taking place all over the North Bank, the urban core. But the reason why a lot of it taking place is because there is no plan of action by a collect group of African Americans. They're not interested in sitting down and putting a plan of action together. Once again, and I want to make sure in closing, that's very important. It's not about racism. Racism is still a problem in this country. If anything, the most important thing when it comes to dealing with racism is not really racism, it's bigotry. It's a small group, what we call the poke chop game operating in Jacksonville. Now they don't take over the whole state of Florida with your governor. But when it really come down to the African American community, I say all them old geezers need to go.
And on that note, Stanley Doc Scott, Managing Director of the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank. This is part 2. We're going to do a part 3. Now, I'm going to work to try to get some of these other folks together, and we're going to and see if we can sort of have it out night. Be honest with you, a lot of them are still hesitant to put their actual thoughts and beliefs online and in writing for the very reasons that we've talked about here. But we're going to still push on. We're going to have another chance for you and I to talk, to delve a little deeper in exactly one of these topics. But I appreciate your time today, Stanley. Yes.
Before you go, one thing I'd like to say this. We have the opportunity to control 50 to $100 million onto my African American community. If we would just come together, 5 to 10 of us, and I know who the 10 that need to take place, but I'm open to anybody. Thank you.